Back in the Protestant Reformation, pretty much every single church practice was put under a microscope. But man, none were debated more fiercely than infant baptism. And right at the heart of that storm was the reformer John Calvin. He actually created one of the most powerful and lasting defenses for the practice. So how did he do it?
I mean, let's just ask the question plainly. Why baptize babies? It seems simple, right? But the answers are incredibly deep. Why would you perform this sacred ritual on a person who has absolutely no idea what's going on?
And for Calvin, you gotta understand, this wasn't just some dusty old theological argument. To him, this was a battleground, a battle for the very heart of the church, and maybe more importantly, for the reliability of God's promises. The stakes, they couldn't have been higher.
Yeah. Calvin, he did not pull his punches. He called his opponents, the Anabaptists, who believed you should only baptize adult believers, he called them frantic spirits and even mad beasts. In his mind, they weren't just a little bit wrong, they were tearing the very fabric of the church apart.
So what was this whole thing really about? Well, for Calvin, everything, and I mean everything, came down to the authority of the Bible. He famously argued that any practice in the church, especially a sacrament, hangs by a thread if you can't root it directly in Scripture. This was his non-negotiable starting point. So where did Calvin even start to build his case from the Bible? He began with the one idea that he saw running through the entire biblical story, the covenant. For him, if you can just grasp this one concept, the whole debate about infant baptism clicks into place. See, for Calvin, the covenant isn't just some contract. It's this living, breathing, unbreakable promise from God. And here's the key. It's not just a promise to you as an individual. It's a promise to you and to your children and to their children after them. This whole idea of the family being included is absolutely central to his argument.
Okay, this side right here, this is basically Calvin's whole argument in a nutshell. He said, look, in the Old Covenant, the sign of belonging to God's people was circumcision, right? And it was given to infant boys. He argued that baptism does the exact same job in the New Covenant. It's just a new sign for the same promise. So his logic was simple. If the old sign was for babies, why on earth wouldn't the new one be? So you see, for Calvin, it was a direct swap. Baptism wasn't some brand new invention out of nowhere. It was just the continuation of God's promise with a different sign. And in his view, to deny this new sign to infants, well, that would feel like taking a giant step backward from the grace God had already shown his people.
Okay, but right about now, you're probably thinking about the biggest, most obvious objection, right? The one his opponents brought up all the time. Babies can't believe. So how in the world can you baptize them? Let's get into how Calvin tackled that one.
In his critics, they had a pretty powerful point. They'd open up the Bible and say, look, right here, it says people hear the good news, they believe, and then they get baptized. To them, that order was set in stone. Teach, believe, baptize. And honestly, it sounds like a really strong argument.
But Calvin's response to this is absolutely brilliant. He makes this one crucial distinction. He says, you're right. For an adult convert who's joining the church from the outside, they absolutely have to be taught and believe first. But, and this is the big but, he argues that children of believers are in a totally different category. Why? Because they're born inside the covenant promise already. So his logic really boils down to 3 simple steps. Let's walk through it. First, he says the children of believers are born as heirs to God's promise. It's their birthright. Second, baptism is the external sign, the seal, that just confirms that reality. It shows they're part of God's family. And third, and this is so important, they are baptized into a future faith. For Calvin, the promise plants the seed, the baptism confirms it, and then that faith will grow and blossom over time.
All right, let's zoom out for a second and really talk about why this whole debate mattered so much and why Calvin's defense has had such a massive, lasting impact on so many churches even today. Now, a question that always comes up is, okay, fine, if you baptize babies, why not give them communion, the Lord's Supper? Well, Calvin drew a really sharp line between the two. He saw baptism as the one-time sign of initiation, of entering the family. The only requirement is belonging to the covenant. But the Lord's Supper? That's for ongoing spiritual nourishment, and the Bible is super clear that it requires self-examination and remembrance, things a baby just can't do. For Calvin, this wasn't just about following a rule. It was about all the incredible blessings that come with it. It's a huge comfort for parents, confirming God's promise extends to their kids.
It formally welcomes that child into the church community. And maybe most importantly, it serves as a lifelong reminder to that child that they have belonged to God from the very beginning of their life. And this all leads to what is maybe the most powerful part of his whole argument. Calvin believed that Jesus came to expand God's grace, to make it bigger and wider, not to shrink it. So, since infants were already visibly included as God's people with circumcision, taking that visible sign away from them now in the New Testament, well, that would seem to suggest that Jesus' arrival actually made God's grace less visible. And for Calvin, that was just an unthinkable conclusion. So it's pretty wild, isn't it? How a debate from 500 years ago over an ancient ritual can still draw the lines that define entire communities today. Because when you get down to it, the answer isn't just about a ritual. It's about how you see God's promises, what you believe about faith, and what it truly means to belong. And that 16th century argument is still shaping the identity of millions of people all over the world.